So good morning, everyone, and thank you very, very much, first of all, to the organizers, to our hosts, director, many thanks for your warm welcome, but I think even more so, many thanks for the support that we have received by being able to host the conference here in the first place, which is tremendously beneficial for us, and we're very grateful to the university for being able to have our 2019 conference, not only in these great venues that we're having here and in very good infrastructure, but also in such a historic place, as Monica has just pointed out. I learned in preparing for this conference that this actually is one of the world's oldest continuously operational universities, and which I'm sure will provide us with a lot of ideas and input for further discussions over the coffee break and over the dinner and lunches, to see what the responsibility of universities are in those challenges, the global challenges that we're facing and that we're trying to address with humanistic management also. Because I think we're talking as management scholars a lot about corporate social responsibility, CSR, or corporate citizenship and so forth. And we're talking very, very little about academic responsibility. And I think the content and the forms in which we teach and in which we prepare future business leaders is very relevant, and is something that we need to reflect on ourselves just as much as we're reflecting on the actions and the mindsets and the way in which businesses go about doing their business. But that's not the topic of my lecture now. What I'm going to be talking about is actually what humanistic management is, how we understand it in the Humanistic Management Network, and why we think it's a good idea. And so that is more to provide us with a broad framework and with a backbone for this conference series, which has a different topic every year. Last year we were in Bangalore. Shiv, you got to stand up now. So this is last year's host, and we were very lucky and happy to have a great conference. That we have had a great conference last year in Bangalore in India. So the conference is moving around all over the world to try and reach out to as many people as we can and engage people for what we're aiming at in different places in the world. So let me spend like 1 minute, if this works, which I hope it will, to open the website on what the Humanistic Management Network actually is. We are a Swiss-based association that is registered as a non-profit organization, so we're an NGO that is based in Switzerland, but we work and live and function and operate through the local chapters we have all over the world. And to show you some of the chapters, our website is humanisticmanagement.network, so you can find social media links and see what we're up to on the website. And the place where the activities, the work is really happening are the chapters, and we've got many of them here, which we're very happy about. But the active ones are here, and the presence ones are China. Ping Ping from China is here, and Colombia with Carlos. We have the Dutch chapter. Is anyone from the Netherlands here already, or are they coming later? I know there's some coming, but I don't know if they're here already. No, not yet. Okay, so we've got Dutch people. We've got Shiv from India. We've got Nigeria. Kemi is here. We've got Christina and colleagues from the UK. From Zimbabwe, unfortunately, no one could come, but Zimbabwe is one of those examples where I am really deeply impressed by how people manage to look intensively and take action towards more responsible business conduct in very, very adverse environments, because Zimbabwe certainly isn't an easy place to talk about anti-corruption, to talk about ethics, to talk about solidarity and the common good in business. And we have some people we're collaborating with in Zimbabwe who, in face of all these adversities, are still pushing ahead and are not shying away from even personal dangers that you have when you're being too loud and too vocal in these countries. So we live, work, and act through our chapters all over the world. And just to give you two more highlights, the conference, you know, that we're having right here, right now, but we're also having events on top of that the chapters are organizing. And I don't know if my connection here is fast enough, but we're having a series of events that are locally organized also. And so we had the Colombia chapter. Carlos, where are you? You're sitting back there. So Colombia is one of the chapters that is organizing very regular events on the ground there in Bogota, meeting up with people. We're going to have the first event of our youngest chapter in China in a few months, in November. So I'm very excited about that. And so we have these local events that are more embedded in the local context and that are not as big as our annual conference. So we see the upcoming ones is a contribution to the Business and Human Rights Forum of the United Nations in Geneva that we'll be doing. You see the China one, the upcoming event in China here, and some past events are a boot camp that I'm doing in collaboration with the university in Bangalore. We've got the Colombia, the UK chapters. Nigeria, Kenya has organized something a few months ago. So we have all these local events that are happening on top of the big annual get-together, which we're having now. And the last thing I want to show you briefly is the publications that we're doing under the label of knowledge generation. So we're aiming to produce new knowledge, and we're doing that through a variety of publication channels, journal publications, of course. The flagship product there is probably a book series that we have with Palgrave Macmillan. And I'm only now realizing that you don't see the slides that the website that I'm seeing on my screen here. So I only see that now. I've been showing you our website the whole time, assuming that this actually works, and now I see it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't matter. We're done. So yes. Well, thanks for listening very patiently, and without seeing what I'm talking about, actually, good start. But so the bottom line is check out humanisticmanagement.network, and you can find all of the things I was talking about there. And we're an organization that is very much trying to walk the talk. So the chapters that we do have are operating very autonomously. It's about self-determination. Humanistic management is also about finding your own purpose and being able and having the freedom and the autonomy to pursue it. So we are having an increasing number of chapters. They're growing in a good speed, I think, because if you're growing too fast, it becomes unmanageable. And we've been adding around, between 1 and 2 chapters a year. And it's exciting times for the network. So I'm very happy, and I'm talking far too long on this introduction kind of part still. But I thank you very much again for all being here, and hoping that now you can actually see the slides that I'm showing. We'll dive into the presentation. Just quickly as an add-on, this is the annual conference of the Humanistic Management Network. For me personally, there's 2 more organizations I co-founded or founded, which is the Humanistic Management Center. You can see on the logo and the way the whole thing looks that it's a spin-off, it's a sister of the network. And what we found, or what I saw, is that I wanted to offer consulting services, executive trainings, those kind of things, market-facing activities, and doing that in a non-profit association becomes very tricky very quickly. And so to have it separate and to keep it clean, I started the Humanistic Management Center as a place where I can decide more by my own what kind of market-facing activities I want to engage with. And then the last addition was Ethics First, which is an executive training organization. It's a brand, it's not an own legal entity, but it's a collaboration between the University of Tübingen in southern Germany and the Humanistic Management Center to offer training opportunities, training content to business organizations. And those are the three entities, and as you can imagine, I never know how much time to put where and what I'm doing at which moment, so it can get a bit blurred and even messy at times, but it's a whole lot of fun. Let's finally now actually do get started with the content. What I want to start with is with these sort of the foundation or the initial thought process that I think Wolfgang and the other founders of the network and I were sharing definitely, which is that we need to use markets more wisely. We have as a situation the fact that the combination of democratic government and variations of market economies have had a hugely liberating effect on societies and have created unprecedented wealth. So that's a good thing, right? At the same time, though, we have the complication that the situation we have created is such that we're biting the hand that feeds us. We're both on the environmental side and the distribution side, so inequality and the natural capacity of the planet is stretched to a level where we cannot simply maintain a position that we can carry on doing business as usual. So we're talking about the negative side effects of a big success story. I think that's something we should bear in mind with all the critique we have, with all the rightful demands that we're placing on political and business leaders. I think we should not forget that by and large, we're operating a pretty big success story here. And that we need, and that's our conclusion, then that we need to learn how to use markets more wisely. And that's the challenge we're confronted with. So I want to take you through four key points over the next 30 minutes or so, which is first to provide some global context, and then we move on to the mental model that is conducive to humanistic management. I will introduce a few key drivers, and then in the management paradigm, in the fourth part, we're going to be looking at the three-stepped approach to humanistic management, which is how we define humanistic management within the work of the Humanistic Management Network. So, to move to the global context, I want to start with a small story of a photo I took in New York. This is the Time Warner building in Columbus Circus. And who we're seeing here is Paul from Nigeria, who is living in New York. And he's cleaning glass that was produced in the Netherlands. And the glass that he's cleaning there is mounted onto hinges that come from steel that was made in Brazil, while he's working for a US-American facilities firm. The cleaning products he uses were made in Canada. And the squeegee with which he pulls off the water from the window is using rubber that comes from China. Whilst the lift he's sitting on was assembled in Mexico, and the global tenants for the tenants for which he is keeping the windows clean so that they have a nice view and a good working environment are tenants from all over the world. Now, this is only the first part of the story, because this would be a story of globalization, but it also is a story of globalized supply chains. Because the cleaning products come from Canada, yes, but they are made by a company that is Japanese. So it's a Japanese company producing these cleaning products in Canada. The steel is made in Brazil, but it's owned by an Indian investor who is owning the steel mill and the mine. While the squeegee from China is using Indonesian rubber, the lift from Mexico was designed by a German engineering firm, and the glass from the Netherlands is made with quartz sands from France. While the global tenants sitting in that building are sitting in a building that is co-owned by investors from Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and the US. So I think we need to be acutely aware that we cannot find solutions, we cannot think of our business environment, of the way we act as economic agents in some insular way. We do live in a fully global marketplace, in a fully integrated marketplace, and whatever we do to address the challenges we're confronted with, we need to bear in mind that this is the reality today. And we can build the same story on on this little bottle that someone probably forgot yesterday, or is it one of yours? We can build the same story on pretty much any object that you're holding in your hands or that you're seeing. I would be surprised if we managed to see or touch one industrially manufactured object in a day that has not got some kind of cross-border international content. So let's be aware of us living in a global marketplace, and I'm just wanting to put some data behind this. This is I'm not sure. I think it's World Bank or IMF data. I don't know which of the two I took it from, but this is foreign direct investments. So this is investments that are done by businesses in countries outside of where their headquarters are located, of where they're officially registered as their business zone. And we don't have to go through details, but it is clear that the story that we were telling about Paul the window cleaner is reflected and is correlated more broadly by the investment activities we're seeing all over the world. And it started, of course, with the neoliberal reform agenda in the 1980s and Washington consensus, recession, financial crisis, and then it kept going up. But the story we were just looking at is supported by and it correlates well with the macro picture we find on international, on global, transnational investment activities. And we're facing two main challenges in the world today as a global community. And I'm curious, is there any of the students in the back or on the side? You have to come after the lunch, after the coffee break, you have to sit further in the front, please. But which are the two challenges? Any ideas? What would you say are the two big challenges we face as a global community? Maybe I should sit down because this is going to take a while until someone has the courage to actually answer. But come on, you don't need to be shy. Just think what do you think are the two big challenges that we're facing in the world?
Maybe the uneven distribution of goods.
Yes, thank you. That is one of them. Thank you very much. And the second one? The second one? Yes.
It's probably ecological issues.
Exactly. It's the environment. I think those are the two macro challenges we're confronted with as a global community. If we're looking at all the things we see on the news that we find disturbing or that anger us, or when we think that this shouldn't happen, or all these negative headlines that we see that we're confronted with on a daily basis, I would argue there's not any of those that you cannot bring down to one of the two macro challenges. It's either connected to distribution or connected to the environmental challenge. And on the environmental side, of course, climate change is the big topic, but it's a lot more connected to the environmental challenge. And on the environmental side, of course, climate change is the big topic, but it's a lot more. It's about extinction of species. It's about It's about water quality. I was at a conference in Brussels Monday and Tuesday, and there was a philosopher there who said how important also the exchange with other disciplines is. And he explained that he learned from a geologist that the melting ice caps do not only translate to higher water levels, but we know from the Earth's history that they also translate to a huge increase in volcanic activity. So we have all these additional effects that we're not even aware of. The environmental challenge is much broader than climate change, but of course climate change is the major one that we're discussing currently. This is the solar system we would need for our current lifestyles. Right? In the OECD countries, we're consuming the resources of roughly 4 planets. There's a thing called a footprint calculator. There's various organizations offering it. Try it out. It's interesting. It's not precise science, but you can enter a few things like, how big is the flat you're living in? Do you use a car? How often do you drive it? Your eating habits play a role. We all know that meat consumption is pretty intensive in the emissions. And for me, I'm doing pretty well until I add my flights, right? So that's, for me, that's the total killer. It's a big, it gets more and more dominant for me as a question of how I can reduce it, how I should reduce it, if I can argue that I shouldn't fly or that I should fly, depending on where to. But that's a thing that anyone can, that I shouldn't fly or that I should fly, depending on where to. But that's a thing that anyone can do and decide for themselves. But decide for themselves. But take a look, if you want, at a thing called footprint calculator. If you Google it, you'll find a series of results. And you can look a little bit about what your own personal footprint is. In the OECD countries, we need roughly 4 planets. And of course, we know we don't have them. We only have one. So on the environmental challenge, it's very clear that we need to learn. So on the environmental challenge, it's very clear that we need to learn to live within our means. I'll spare you with the data, but it's globally 1.6%. So many of the low-income economies, poverty is ecologically very good, right? Yes, you burn a little more for firewood, so it's, to some degree forests are suffering, but by and large it's good to be poor for the environment. But of course we don't want people to be poor. We don't want people to live in existential hardship, so we need to find better ways of living within our means from the ecological perspective. This sometimes I'm asked if it's photoshopped. It's not. So this is not 2 pictures that are somehow stuck together, but this is one picture, one photo. Do we have anyone from Brazil here? I don't think so, no. Okay, this is a picture taken in Sao Paulo. It's a favela here called Paraisópolis, and you see right next to the favela you have a very prosperous, a very nice apartment building. And they're living right next to each other. And I think that is in many ways the situation we have in the world all over, right? We have on one side, we have a huge prosperity and wealth and people that are living in abundance. And right next door, in a not literal way, we have extreme poverty, and sometimes we even have the extreme poverty literally next door. And if we're putting some data behind it, the economists will know this is a champagne glass distribution. I don't think I have to explain why it's got that name. And we don't have to look at the individual numbers, but we're all acutely aware that wealth distribution in the world is not exactly at a level where we would want it, from both a perspective of fairness, of justice, but also increasingly from a very pragmatic perspective. I don't know if any of you come across that, but it's one of the most fashionable things right now is for ultra high net worth individuals, so people that own several million, several hundred millions, or even several million, several hundred millions, or even several billions, billions. Incredibly rich people, phenomenally rich people. The most fashionable thing for them right now is to buy land in places like New Zealand or in Alaska or in faraway remote places where they and their families will be safe if the shit hits the fan, to be frank. So this is not a situation that we can view as in any form desirable or right. But the important thing with distribution is that we see that it is not only a question of moral justice, of fairness, but it has also increasingly become a question of systemic threat. Right? Once wealth distribution or distribution of opportunities in life are too uneven at some point, and that varies between societies, but no society can bear an unlimited amount of inequality. At some point, there will be a reaction, and in most cases, that's a violent reaction. So distribution is the second macro challenge that we need to address, and again, there's lots of data supporting that, but we don't need to look at it in detail. The big picture is, I think, the relevant part here. Now, what does this mean for business? Because after all, we call the Humanistic Management Network And our deliberate aim is to actually impact business organizations. So we have to find ways to link these challenges to the daily reality in business organizations if we want to get their attention and if we want to make impact on businesses. And so I brought two studies and two data sets there that are quite relevant for this question. And one is called the, no, this is the Gallup. This is the Gallup study. No, it's the Edelman Trust Barometer, sorry. So they're basically asking on credibility of public statements. So the question here is, they're looking at what they call an informed global public. So those are people with a higher education degree that are in full-time employment, that generally live in urban areas or in suburban areas, people that have a broad enough background that they can have an informed thoughts on the question that is being asked. And the question is, how credible do you think statements are from different professions, from different groups of people? And we see the bottom are business and political leaders. So what this means is that if a business leader, if the CEO of a major company is in the evening news giving an interview, roughly 60% of the people watching it will think this guy is lying to me. I don't believe, whatever he says, I don't believe it, right? So we have only 43% in business leaders and only 38% in political leaders of the global informed public that think statements of CEOs and political leaders are credible. And we all know the importance of trust, right? Trust is greatly beneficial in reducing transactional costs from the business perspective. Trust enables you to collaborate productively, to innovate together, and to do that in a much more efficient and effective way than if trust is absent. So the relevance for business cannot be underestimated of this lack of trust, of society thinking that business actors are actually telling us the truth and are credible in what they say, and consequently are doing things that make a contribution that is desirable. The second data set I brought on this is the organizational well-being, and this is the Gallup study now. Gallup is a research organization and consulting firm, and they're doing something that is, it's known as the well-being study. I think the formal name is State of the Global Workplace Study, is what they call it. And they're asking companies, or they're testing for three types of employees, right? And the first type of employee is the engaged employee. The second one is not engaged, and the third one is actively disengaged. It's pretty much self-explaining what that means, and I think it's not a big surprise that we have these three types. I'm sure in whatever organization you're working or active or present in, you will probably know at least one of each of those three. I hope you sitting here are all in the first category. I hope you're all engaged members of your organizations, because that will make you much happier people also. But we have those three, and I think that's not a big surprise. The engaged people are employees that work with passion and feel a profound connection to their company or organization, and that drive innovation and move things forward in the organization. Now we have the not engaged employees, and they're essentially checked out. They play it by the book. They do nothing wrong, but they're sleepwalking through their day, and they don't bring any energy and passion into their work. While the last category, the actively disengaged, are actually a really destructive force in the organization. They're undermining and disturbing and hurting those things that the first and the second are building up and are trying to achieve. In itself, as I said, it's not very surprising that we have these three categories. The scary part, and especially for businesses, the scary part are the numbers that we have behind them, because we only have around 30% of the workforce that is engaged. We have around 50% that are not engaged, and we have the remaining 20% that are actively disengaged. So this means that we have around 70% of the global workforce who profoundly dislike or don't enjoy or don't want to do what they're doing. And now this is, of course, bad news, pretty profound bad news on two levels, I think. First of all, it's bad news for business, no doubt. You're having 70% of your workforce where you don't tap their creativity, their willingness to walk the extra mile if there's a need to do so, to collaborate in a productive way, to do all of those things that we know move organizations forward and provide a more productive way of running businesses. But I think the even bigger problem arising from this data is the human side. I mean, this means this data translates into millions and millions of people who are spending anything between 6 and 12 hours a day doing something they don't like doing. They would rather not do. And I think on the human side, that's pretty devastating news. I mean, I cannot imagine spending my working day, the vast majority of the time that I'm not sleeping, doing something that I don't like, that I don't want to be doing, and doing that every morning, getting up every morning, going to work to do something that you don't want to be doing, that you don't feel engaged in, that you don't feel a connection with. I think that the human side of that is much bigger, much more problematic than the business side. And of course, we know how this all translates then to mental health issues, to individual well-being figures, and all these questions that we know from societal analysis. So these are two data sets: the trust and the employee engagement, where I would argue that both of those figures are very closely related to the global challenges we're facing, and the fact that we're not having a general perception that businesses are playing a positive contribution, a positive role in addressing these challenges. And that's why the results, so that's part of the reason why the results are so bad. And that is something that businesses shouldn't ignore. And we see, Carlos, in your lecture yesterday, you were talking about it. We see that the organizations that are addressing these issues are being very successful at it. Now, to close this section, the role of business, I think the solution is in co-creating. Co-creation is what we need. We need a stronger and better collaboration between different actors. If we're looking at the challenges we're facing, they are too big for any one actor to find the solution on their own. If we're waiting for policymakers to regulate, and then the businesses are lobbying against the regulation, and the NGOs are saying the businesses are only greedy, money-grabbing organizations that stalk our planet, and the businesses say the NGOs are just lazy people who never worked a day in their real life, and don't know the real world. And the policymakers are saying the NGOs are too radical, and everyone blames each other and they don't get stuff done. And we need to be aware that the challenges we're having are too big for any one single actor to do it on their own. If we're waiting for the United Nations or the NGO world to solve these problems, I don't think we're going to be getting there. If we're waiting for a regulation to do it, it's not going to happen on its own. If we're waiting, and the consequence of that, if we would expect business to do it alone, it wouldn't happen either. But we can't do it without business. So business needs to become an integrated part of finding these solutions. Whilst it would be wrong to single-handedly blame business and say it's business's fault on everything. It's us as consumers, it's our policymakers who don't have the guts to actually take some more courageous steps. It's the NGO world that in many ways is, from perspectives of integrity and from perspectives of transparency, worse, studies show, than the private sector. If I'm looking at organizations in the non-profit sector, if you look at transparency on their finances, for example, if you look at how their donations are being used and the accountability of that, you find a lot of black boxes. You find somehow there's money going in, and somewhere there's a campaign or something being put out. Whatever happens in between, you don't know, and you won't find out. So I think it is wrong to blame single-handedly any of these actors. What we need is the awareness that we need to co-create solutions. No one can do it alone, but no one's is to blame alone either. So on the global context, playing an active role in finding solutions to the challenges we face as a global community is both a moral imperative as well as a necessity to sustain success in a competitive marketplace. Which brings me to the second part, which you'll be happy to hear is a lot shorter. And that is the key, the mental model that we need to deploy. And I just got a little game with letters here. You all know what B2B means. What does B2B stand for in the business context? Business to business, exactly. Another type of organizations, if you want to use this framing of businesses, are B2C organizations. What does B2C stand for? To consumers, exactly. And B2G would be business to government. Those are businesses that mainly serve governments. And now what we argue and propose in humanistic management is that all businesses, no matter what sector they're in, what size they're in, what geography they're in, what customer segments they serve, they're all H to H. Now what does H to H stand for? Exactly. So that's the mental model we need in humanistic management. It's very short, it's very simple, but we need to view businesses not in this mechanistic way of imagining it like a gearbox and you turn a big wheel on the top and then you know exactly what 200,000 cogs underneath are going to be doing. That's not how organizations work. That's not what businesses are. Business is first and foremost human interaction. And as a friend of both Wolfgang and I, Lothar in Tübingen always says, business is people working together with people to create value for people. That's the mental model we need. That's what business is all about. Business is people working together with people to create value for people. And with that mindset, with that mental model, we can advance on our humanistic management agenda. Some key drivers, just to put up a few of the terminology and a bit of the terminology, a few of the key words that are relevant here to start getting closer to the reality and to making impact in businesses. I've got two pairings and then one single word. The two pairs are purpose and legitimacy. The second one is passion with integrity, and then the third one is empathy. And we can discuss over coffee what the moderator for empathy should be. I've heard so far people saying love needs to moderate empathy, and others say care. Or maybe it can stay alone. I don't know. That's something we can talk over coffee. Purpose and legitimacy, and I'll say after both of them how they belong together, I think. Purpose is very clear. Your purpose as a business is not what you do, but why you do what you do, and why society should want you to do it. So that is very important to have in mind when you're thinking about purpose in organizations. Purpose is linked to why you do it, not what you do. So if you ask a car company what's your purpose and they tell you our purpose is building cars, they haven't understood the question. The purpose of a car company is not to build cars, but to enable individual mobility. And of course that makes a big difference, because the difference is on one hand side you're confined to a mindset where you're putting four wheels on a metal box and stick a combustion engine in it. That's our purpose, is to build cars. If you look at your purpose in a more productive way and say that why are we doing what we're doing, and say we're doing what our purpose is to enable individual mobility, the horizon, the opportunities you have to fulfill that purpose are much, much greater. So it's why you do it, not what you do. And this is the CEO and founder, former CEO and founder of Kyocera, one of Japan's tech giants, Kazuo Inamori, who said in 2 sentences, I think it is, no, 3, in 3 sentences, more than many business books put into 500 pages. And it's very simple, but so much truth in it. Too many people think only of their own profit. But business opportunity seldom knocks on the door of self-centered people. No customer ever goes to a store merely to please the storekeeper, right? And you need to connect your business to a purpose that is related to a societal good. You need to be able to provide a value proposition to society overall, and that's how you get your purpose. Now, integrity, I said integrity is paired with purpose, because your purpose doesn't really have any normative quality yet. You can have a purpose that is seen as very negative, right? Your purpose can be to build the most effective landmines. You can say that's why we exist. Our reason of being, our purpose is to build the best landmines. So purpose in itself doesn't yet tell us anything about the moral quality of that purpose. And that's why we're adding legitimacy to that as a pairing, as a moderator for purpose. And you gain legitimacy as a business if your purpose and the value that guide the ways in which you pursue it are seen as desirable by society at large. And this is Peter Drucker, of course, probably one of the few people where I think he is rightfully called a management guru, who said free enterprise cannot be justified as being good for business. It can be justified only as being good for society. So we need to make sure that our businesses have an interest and an obligation to seek legitimacy for their activities. And legitimacy in this conception of the key drivers that I'm offering is the moderator for purpose. Next driver is passion. And passion is a reality when you're walking the extra mile without noticing it because anything else feels wrong. I think that is sort of my gut definition for what I think passion means. You don't think about shortcuts. They're not an option you consider, right? That's when you're passionate about something. You're doing it the best you possibly can. You're developing virtues and applying virtues, and you're moving at the best you can. Taking shortcuts is not in the range of opportunities to consider. If you find yourself in that situation, then I think you're truly passionate about something. And the quote I brought here is that passion isn't something that lives way up in the sky, in abstract dreams and hopes. It lives at ground level, in the specific details of what you're actually doing every day. So I think we need to be clear on that. If we think about passion, we often think about these loud people that are seeking the stage and telling everyone how passionate they are and what amazing, people they are. And this is not what we mean with passion. With passion, we mean what I said, taking shortcuts feels wrong. You're putting in the best you can. That's what expresses when you're passionate about something. So passion can be very quiet and passion can be timid. Passion is not about being using big words and being loud. And passion, however, can make blind, right? Passion can make you so intensely focused on one single thing that you don't look left and right. You lose the ability to reflect. And so in order to have a moderator for passion, I'm using integrity here. And integrity, there's two. We can look at integrity as virtues, and we can look at integrity as behavioral integrity. And at least in the context when I'm interacting with executives, I go for the simpler one, which is the behavioral integrity. Simply put, say what you do and do what you say, and constantly try and work towards the unity of both. I have not met one person who has 100% behavioral integrity. So it's not about aiming to, and I certainly don't, aiming to in every situation in your life, every day, every hour, every single time, exactly do what you say and say what you do. Most likely, each and every one of us will fail in that. But we can be aware of it and we can work towards failing less and adhering to it more. And I think that's what we should do. And forgive yourselves. I mean, this is something that we need to learn as well, I think, is self-forgiveness in this context. But we should be aware if we're failing on integrity, on behavioral integrity, and we should try and work towards closing that gap. I took quotes from business people deliberately, so I'm not sure whether Warren Buffett or Berkshire Hathaway is actually the primary example for organizational integrity, but he said something that is relevant for businesses, of course, and that business leaders intuitively understand. And he said, in looking for people to hire, you look for three qualities. First, integrity, then intelligence, and thirdly, energy. Don't have the first. The other two will kill you. Right? So what he's saying there is that if you have people that are, but they will use it in a way that is undermining you as an organization. And I find that quite interesting, and I'm going to shift a bit on that also. How we have the whole recruitment process singularly focused on skills, on the way in which people, on which you expect that people bring the functional capacity to work in an organization, and we hardly ever look in a systematic way in the recruitment process on questions of values. And of course, it's going to be a bad hire in HR expressions if you have a new member who has all the functional capacity you need, but where the values aren't aligned to the organization, that is not going to be an employee that will have a good career or that the organization will benefit from. So without integrity, whatever else an employee brings to an organization will not be worth a whole lot for the organization, is what Warren Buffett is saying here. Last key driver, empathy. This is Henry Ford, so one of the most admired entrepreneurs, who was certainly not known to be a softie. But Henry Ford, so one of the most admired entrepreneurs, who was certainly not known to be a softie. But empathy is not about being a softie. We have a misconception of empathy often as running around hugging everyone and being nicey nice. That's not what empathy means. Empathy is a skill. It's a skill that allows you to imagine being in someone else's position. It allows you to know what pains and what pleasures people gain from certain activities that there are, certain situations that they're exposed to. So empathy is a skill. It's a skill of knowing how other people feel in a specific situation. And as individuals, we have this skill developed in variations. Until people like sociopaths that completely lack this skill. That's part of the definition of a sociopath as far as I know. And now what Henry Ford said, without using the word empathy, he's completely talking about empathy when he says that if there's any one secret of success, it lies in the ability to get the other person's point of view and see things from that person's angle as well as from your own. So what he's saying here is that empathy is an incredibly important skill to have in business, and it most definitely is something that we're many times, I think, don't really looking at that as something that is very important in a business environment. Partly, I think, because we have this misconception of empathy being this soft niceness and not the skill of knowing what other people feel, what they experience in being exposed to situations. So with humanistic management, organizations are purpose-driven and legitimacy-seeking. Their members are passionate with integrity and they strive what they do with empathy. And with that, we're coming to the last point, and I'm running late already. So we will have lots of discussion around this over the coming 2 days. And but I will introduce to you the three main steps as how how are we translating all the presentation, all the things I presented so far into something that can be an anchor for reflection, I call it, to both us as academics and us as managers, as people who are in some kind of leadership function in organizations. And the three steps are firstly the unconditional respect of the dignity of life. I have not yet met one person who said this is nonsense, which is the great thing in being able to connect to executives, to NGO people, to policymakers. Dignity is one of those things that I believe can claim universality. And if we're looking at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, the preamble expressively says that these human rights are there because we need to protect human dignity, right? So dignity is the foundation of the human rights, which are labeled universal. A conception of dignity, and I've been discussing that with many people, there's variations to how it is seen, but some shape or form of understanding dignity is universal. No executive has ever told me dignity, this stuff is nonsense, who needs to respect dignity. But when you're looking at the reality of daily operations, of course, there's conflict. There's conflict in two areas, mainly. The first area is the conflict within organizations, the culture, the way people are dealing with each other, the way respect is demonstrated and expressed towards the work and the contribution of others, the whole intra-organizational area. And the other dimension is, of course, the whole stakeholder question. To what degree do your activities as a business enhance or decrease the capacity of stakeholders to live a dignified life? If my activity as an industrial manufacturer means that the groundwater level is going down, it means that farmers in the vicinity lose their livelihood. A material basis is necessary to live a dignified life. I'm having a very direct adverse impact on the capacity of people living a dignified life if my activities lead to a lowering of the levels of groundwater. Just a simple example, and we can find plenty of those, of course. And fortunately, we can find a lot of examples where businesses actually act in ways that empower people to live a dignified life. And that's part of the research we're doing. We've got a book out and another one coming on business cases of humanistic management, where you can't find those examples where businesses actually contribute to these things. Secondly, integration of ethical reflection in management decisions. So what that means is that we're currently finding a lot of operations based on what we call a corrective logic. So you're doing business as usual, and then an oil platform blows up, or a roof collapses and falls on your workers, and many people die, environmental damages are done, a lot of negative effects, and then you have to spend much money to correct that. So it's a corrective model. And we're saying it's much smarter to integrate, to have integrative models to integrate these ethical reflections that then lead to decisions that hopefully oil platforms will blow up less and roofers will collapse fewer, and people will get a better deal in their organizations, to put it in simple terms. But the second part is integrating ethical reflections in management decisions. And the third one is really about how do we put the rubber on the road? How do we translate this to real action? And the primary tool that we're suggesting is stakeholder engagement. I would not know a better way for conflict resolution in a civilized and peaceful manner than engaging in a dialogue, than talking to the people and exchanging arguments in a way that the power of the better argument prevails. And that's what businesses can and should do, and I think it's in their very interest to do so. Stakeholder engagement allows you to build an insurance policy. It builds a safety net for reputational risks. So beyond the moral obligation to use dialogue in situations of conflict rather than resorting to other forms of might makes right logic or even violence, you have a dialogue, you have an exchange of arguments, and the power of the better argument prevails. So that's the moral dimension, but you also have the very business casey dimension of this safety net for reputational damages. And secondly, I think very important, a way to develop new business ideas, to develop future business models. If I, as a business, only listen to those people who have the purchasing power today, I will only find solutions for the markets today. I think it is no surprise that if we're looking at where today's world market leaders in environmental technologies sit, they're all in areas where in the late 1970s, early 1980s, there were strong environmental movements. Right? We have them in California, we have them in Germany, in Switzerland, there's quite a few. So everywhere where you had these really strong moves for green movements, 30, 40 years ago, today we have world market leaders in environmental technologies. That is no coincidence. Listening to your stakeholders will tell you about your business models of tomorrow. Even if there's no direct imminent need for implementing them today, you will learn about future opportunities. If you're not listening only to those who have power over you today, but if you're listening into society and what society expects and demands from their corporate citizens. I'm sorry for running late. And of course, there is a lot of more information on these three steps that I put together. There's a lot of more information on these three steps that I put together for us to look into more detail. I'm happy to send this presentation out to everyone. I think in large parts it is already on our website. So if you go to the publications part on the humanisticmanagement.network, you will find that presentation or most of it. Now, I opened this talk with the two macro challenges that we're confronted with. The first was the environmental one, and the second the distributional one. So I'm going to close with that also. And I brought one slide here of a desert, of course, And this is a study that was done by an organization called Desert Tech, which found that every 6 hours, the deserts of this world receive as much energy from the sun as humanity consumes per year, right? And all we do is dig holes in the ground to take out fossil fuels that we can burn. We can do better. We can do better, and we don't have a shortage of energy on this planet. Right? Every 6 hours, we receive an annual energy consumption of humanity. We just need to use it. We need to be able to tap into it in a more intelligent way than digging holes into the ground and burning the stuff that we pull out. And on the distributional challenge, I think we live in an age of abundance, but we have yet to learn to create shared value and share the value we create. And that is what this conference to a good amount is about. It's solidarity and contributing to the common good, and making sure that the abundance and the prosperity we have is shared in ways that allows for a dignified life for everyone who's sharing this planet with us. And with that, I want to thank you very much for the attention. And you've got the links here, and you can go to our website and find a lot more information. I'm again very happy for you to all be here, and I hope we'll together have a great time over the next 2 days and enjoy your conference. Thank you very much.